In a glass cathedral of ocean blue, a silent child finally speaks. At Monterey Bay Aquarium, a whisper changes everything mermaid. Sunlight poured through the high skylights and danced across the polished floors, casting ripple-like shadows onto visitors who strolled in wonder. Ethan Blake adjusted the strap of his luxury watch and glanced down at his daughter Lily. At 7 years old, she was small for her age, her pale face framed by wild blonde curls and green eyes that seldom blinked. She walked close to him, but never touched her silence louder than the chatter of school groups and spring tourists around them. He hadn't planned to be here. This trip had been a last-minute decision, born from desperation and a flash of memory, his late wife Claire, laughing with Lily on the beach near Big Sur, letting the waves kiss their toes. That was before the hospital, before the silence. 2 years now since Lily had spoken. Not a word, not a sound. Therapists had tried everything. Ethan had tried everything money could buy. Nothing had reached her. They wandered through the aquarium's winding glass tunnels, watching jellyfish float like alien ghosts and sea otters tumbling through kelp. Lily's expression didn't change, but Ethan noticed her head tilt slightly at the sound of dolphin clicks from a nearby speaker. Hope fluttered cautious and thin. They moved into the main exhibit hall just as the lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd. A sign glowed overhead: Mermaid Show, 11:00 a.m. He guided Lily to the front row, gently placing his hand near her back without touching. The main tank towered before them, 50 feet deep, shimmering with schools of silver fish and fronds of waving kelp. Children pressed their noses to the glass. Parents lifted phones. The lights faded further until a single spotlight pierced the water. She descended from above like something from a myth. Naomi Rivers, a black mermaid performer, moved through the water with mesmerizing grace. Her deep brown skin shimmered in the light like polished onyx, her long hair floating around her like seaweed spun from ink. The emerald and sapphire of her silicone tail caught and fractured the light into tiny comets. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the adults stilled. Naomi twisted, blew a stream of bubbles, then flipped backward in a smooth arc, casting rings that rose like glass halos. Lily's fingers tightened on the metal railing. Her eyes widened, locked onto Naomi. Ethan leaned closer to say something, but froze when he saw Lily's lips part. She pressed closer to the glass, breath fogging its surface in tiny bursts. Then, in a voice fragile as a tide pool breeze, she whispered, "Mermaid." The word landed between them like thunder. Ethan dropped to a knee, stunned. "Lily," he asked, voice cracking. But she didn't look at him. Her entire world had narrowed to the black mermaid beyond the glass. Naomi noticed the girl's gaze and slowed her routine. Their eyes met across water and reflection, and Naomi's smile softened, warm and deep like the ocean floor. She reached toward the glass hand open, then spun upward, trailing glittering scales as she surfaced. The show continued, but for Ethan and Lily, time had stopped. They didn't speak as they left the tank area. Ethan's mind was spinning. He had no explanation. Only that for the first time in 2 years, his daughter had spoken. Not for a doctor, not for him. For a woman in a tale. As they exited, Ethan turned to a nearby staff member. "Who was that?" he asked, his voice still trembling. "The performer. The mermaid." "That's Naomi Rivers," the staffer replied. "She's one of our best. Been here for a few years now. Used to be a competitive diver, had a bad accident, I think. But the kids love her." Ethan repeated the name under his breath, Naomi Rivers, a woman of color, gracefully invisible to the crowd unless she was in costume. But to Lily, she wasn't invisible. She was magic. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood at the hotel window watching fog roll in from the Pacific, replaying the moment over and over. Not even his mother's voice or Claire's memory had reached Lily. But Naomi had. He looked down at his daughter curled in bed, the scallop shell souvenir she'd picked out clutched in her small hand. She slept with it held close as if it meant something only she understood. Tomorrow, Ethan decided they were going back. He didn't yet know what he would say or ask. He only knew this something had shifted. Lily had spoken, and whatever thread had connected her voice to Naomi's presence, he had to follow it. Ethan stared out into the dark, the hum of ocean waves in the distance. "Who is she?" he whispered. He knew they had to find her. A billionaire knocks on a backstage door holding a secret and a daughter's fragile hope. Not everything can be bought, and not everyone wants to be. The next morning, Ethan Blake returned to the Monterey Bay Aquarium not as a curious tourist, but as a man with a mission. Lily walked beside him, her grip tighter than usual on his blazer, as they made their way through the familiar scent of salt and glass. The memory of her voice saying mermaid echoed in his mind, unreal but unforgettable. He had made discreet inquiries at the front desk, and was now being led past security doors and into the quieter behind-the-scenes corridors of the aquarium. His heart thudded with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Lily had not spoken again since that moment, but she clutched her pink scallop shell and followed without resistance. That in itself was a miracle. They reached a small changing area where the soft sounds of dripping water and muffled voices mingled with the distant hum of filtration systems. Naomi Rivers was there, her long black hair still damp and curling at the ends. She wore a turquoise wrap skirt and a gray Monterey Bay Aquarium t-shirt, barefoot drying off her gear. The room smelled of seawater shampoo and rubber. When she turned and saw them, Ethan in his sleek navy blazer and Lily small and wide-eyed, she paused, a towel in hand. Her eyes flicked between them with polite curiosity. "Hi," Ethan began, clearing his throat. "Are you—" Naomi Rivers. Her smile came slowly, cautiously. "That's me," she said, voice low and warm. "Can I help you? I'm Ethan Blake. This is my daughter Lily." He gestured gently to the girl who now stood slightly behind him, clutching the hem of his jacket. "We were here yesterday, and during your performance, something happened." Naomi set the towel aside and stepped closer. Her gaze shifted from Ethan to Lily with quiet focus. "Something." Good. Ethan nodded and his voice cracked slightly. "Lily hasn't spoken in 2 years. Since Claire passed. We've seen doctors, specialists, tried everything. Nothing worked, but yesterday when you swam past," she said one word. "Mermaid." Naomi inhaled slowly, her expression shifting from polite to moved. She knelt gently, her skirt pooling around her on the concrete floor, so her gaze aligned with Lily's. "Is that true, sweetheart?" she asked softly. "Did you like the mermaid?" Lily didn't answer. But her green eyes met Naomi's for one long second, and in that gaze was something neither Ethan nor Naomi could name. Recognition, maybe, or trust. Naomi smiled, wider, not pressing. "Well, I'm glad you came back." Ethan reached into his coat pocket and produced a slim envelope. "I know this is unconventional," he said, "but I'd like to hire you, just a few hours a week, to spend time with Lily. You clearly connected with her in a way no one else has." Naomi didn't reach for the envelope. She shook her head slowly. "Mr. Blake, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not for sale." She smiled kindly but firmly. "I don't charge to care." He blinked, unused to refusal. "I didn't mean I know." Naomi stood smoothing her skirt. "But if Lily wants to hang out, I'd love that. I run the Ocean Explorers Camp for kids here at the aquarium. It's a hands-on program. Small group, lots of time with animals. It's low pressure, safe, and fun." You can stay nearby and watch if that helps." Ethan hesitated, thrown off by her clarity and generosity. "You do that just like that." Naomi turned to a small duffel and pulled something from the side pocket. She knelt again this time, holding a delicate pink scallop shell. It shimmered faintly in the dim light, its surface smooth from wear. "Lily," she said softly, "this is for you. It's yours now to keep." Lily's eyes fixed on the shell. Naomi extended her hand slowly, as if offering a perch to a bird. After a long moment, Lily reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed Naomi's, and something passed between them, an invisible thread of understanding. Naomi stood again and looked at Ethan. "You don't owe me anything." She felt something. "That matters. Let's start there." Ethan swallowed hard, his jaw tightening against emotion. "Thank you. I don't know how to... this means more than I can express." Naomi gave a small shrug. "You don't have to express it. Just show up." Beside him, Lily clutched the shell to her chest, her curls falling over her face. For the first time in a long while, she looked not just awake, but present. Naomi crouched again and whispered, "See you soon." Her voice was gentle, careful, like sunlight warming a tide pool. Ethan watched her, still stunned. He had entered this room expecting to negotiate with someone to convince her, but Naomi had given them something far greater than agreement. She had offered humanity. As they turned to leave, he couldn't help but look back one more time. Naomi stood in the doorway watching them go, her arms crossed, but her expression soft. He didn't know what Lily had seen in her, but whatever it was real. Ethan watched Naomi kneel beside Lily and whisper, "See you soon." He wondered what if hope lives in her hands. In a classroom full of sea creatures and shells, a silent girl whispers again. Not all healing begins with words. Some begins with touch and wonder. It was a Tuesday morning when Ethan brought Lily to the Ocean Explorers Camp at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. The sky outside was streaked with early April sunlight, but the salt-tinged air still held a spring chill. Inside the camp room, however, warmth bloomed in every corner. Tanks lined the walls alive with darting clownfish seahorses that clung to artificial kelp, and a sleepy octopus curled in a dimmed corner. Tables were scattered with seashells, laminated diagrams, squirt bottles, and plastic magnifying lenses. The scent of brine mingled with the faintly fruity smell of marker pens and crayons. Naomi Rivers stood at the front of the room, her long black hair tied back with a shimmering blue ribbon that caught the light as she moved. Today she wore jeans and a soft green t-shirt with a cartoon dolphin on the front. She greeted each child by name, bending to eye level, offering high fives and playful questions. Her rich brown skin glowed under the classroom lights, and her presence was a tide of calm energy. A couple of the kids ran to her with drawings. One tried to show off a loose tooth. She took it all in with ease. When Naomi spotted Lily at the doorway, she paused, her smile changing gentler, quieter. "Hi there, seashell," she said. Lily stood close to Ethan, holding the pink scallop shell Naomi had given her 2 days ago. It was strung on a shoelace around her neck, now swinging gently with each breath. She didn't respond to Naomi's words, but her feet shifted forward ever so slightly. Ethan crouched beside her and whispered, "It's okay. I'll be right outside." Naomi extended a hand. "Want to see the stingrays?" Lily hesitated, then reached out, barely touching Naomi's fingers as they walked toward the shallow ray touch tank. The other kids had already gathered around, dipping their hands in and giggling when the velvety creatures brushed past. Naomi knelt beside Lily and gently guided her to the edge. "Try holding your hand flat just under the surface. Like this." Naomi demonstrated, her arm barely rippling the water. Lily crouched clumsily, mimicking the motion. Her small fingers trembled slightly, but she held still. A ray glided toward her, gray and smooth like a moving shadow. It brushed her palm, the contact featherlight. Lily gasped. Her lips parted. Soft, she whispered. Naomi froze, then looked up at her, eyes wide, then melting with joy. Yeah, she said, voice hushed. Like velvet, huh? Lily nodded. In the doorway, Ethan blinked. He hadn't expected it, not again, not so soon. He kept still, not wanting to break the moment. He watched his daughter run her fingers along the surface of the tank again, eyes following the gentle creatures with something approaching curiosity. The rest of the session unfolded like a dream he hadn't dared to dream. Lily moved through the classroom at her own pace, sometimes pausing in corners, other times trailing behind Naomi like a cautious little echo. She didn't speak much, but when Naomi knelt by a coral photo and asked, "What color is this?" Lily responded, "Red." Later, she pointed at a sea slug and said, "Starfish." Naomi gently corrected her, and Lily quietly repeated, "Slug." Each word was a pebble dropped into a long, silent pond, ripples of something returning. Near the end of the hour, the children gathered at the art table, sketching ocean animals with thick crayons and watercolor pencils. Naomi sat beside Lily as the girl carefully drew something that looked like a round fish and a swirl of waves. "That's beautiful," Naomi said. "Can you tell me what it is?" Lily tilted her head and said, "Jellyfish." Naomi laughed a soft burst of joy and tapped her own hair. "You think my braid looks like jellyfish tentacles?" Lily's face didn't change, but she made a sound, not a full laugh, but something close, a bubbling noise in her throat. And then she smiled. A real smile. After the session, while the children filed out with parents or guardians, Naomi returned Lily to Ethan. The girl held her shell in one hand and a crayon drawing in the other. "How'd it go?" Ethan asked. Naomi's eyes shone. "She's incredible." Lily glanced up at her father, then turned and looked at Naomi again. Just a few seconds. Then she quietly slipped her hand into Naomi's. Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't say "thank you not" out loud. Instead, he watched Naomi gently squeeze Lily's fingers and let them go. In his mind, he kept hearing the words, "She's coming back to me." Even the calmest waters can hide sudden currents. Naomi dives into routine, but danger stirs below. By late September, the Monterey coastline was draped in early autumn fog, the kind that rolled in from the Pacific like a secret. The summer tourist buzz had faded into a quiet rhythm of school field trips and locals drifting in for calm afternoons near the sea. Naomi Rivers moved through the aquarium with a grace that felt instinctive now, like the tide following the pull of the moon. She had just finished leading a morning Ocean Explorers session, where Lily Blake, now a regular, her voice stronger by the week, had taught another camper how to identify jellyfish with gentle precision. Naomi's days had grown full morning lessons, mermaid performances on weekends, and helping with animal care between. But today, there was a small maintenance request. The filter grate in the main tank nestled near the coral arch had begun to rattle. It was a simple task, one she'd handled before. No danger, just routine. She assured Marcus Reyes, her technician partner, that she could check it herself. "I'll be in and out," she said, clipping her gear belt around her waist. 5 minutes. Outside, a storm was gathering offshore. The skies had darkened without much warning, and sea spray danced high above the coastal highway. Inside the aquarium, the mood remained hushed and focused. Visitors wandered the galleries under the illusion of stillness, unaware that somewhere beneath their feet, currents were shifting. Naomi slipped into her wetsuit, tied her hair back tight, and checked her oxygen gear twice. Marcus stood by the control panel, lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't like this weather," he muttered. "I don't like you going in alone." "I'll be fine," Naomi said, offering him a small, confident nod. "I know the tank better than anyone." Moments later, she slipped beneath the surface of the main tank. The world changed instantly, cool blue and muffled. The lights within the glass cathedral glowed soft and gold, illuminating the swaying kelp and silver flashes of fish darting in and out of the reef structure. Naomi moved through it like a returning queen, her body fluid and confident. She reached the coral arch where the filter was lodged. Her fingers found the loose grate. Just a few screws to tighten. Her breath was steady, the rhythm practiced. But something hummed in her bones, an odd vibration, subtle but wrong. She paused, narrowing her eyes behind her mask. Then came the surge. A sudden violent current slammed into her from the right. It wasn't natural. It was mechanical, an emergency override failure likely triggered by the storm's impact on the backup generator. The filter system had restarted at full blast. The water turned into a roar of motion. Naomi tried to kick away, but the force dragged her sideways. Her oxygen line tangled around a coral spur. Her wrist yanked hard, jerking her body off balance. She reached up to detach the belt, but the current pushed again harder. Her shoulder struck the coral, sharp pain bloomed, and then her head hit the stone just above her ear. Light exploded behind her eyes. Her limbs went slack. The tank swirled into shadow. Above, Marcus saw the control panel flash red. "Naomi," he shouted, slamming the kill switch. The pump powered down, but the damage was done. Without waiting for protocol, Marcus and two other divers plunged into the tank fins, slicing the water. They reached Naomi's floating body, caught in a strand of kelp, a thin trail of blood drifting like ribbon around her. They hauled her up, every movement efficient, practiced. By the time they broke the surface, a stretcher waited on the platform. The next moments, blurred oxygen mask, chest compressions, wet boots on concrete, shouted vitals, an ambulance tearing toward the community hospital of the Monterey Peninsula. Naomi's skin was pale beneath her wetsuit. Her long black hair fanned across the stretcher like spilled ink. Her heart-shaped scallop shell necklace, still fastened around her neck, rose and fell faintly with each labored breath. Word spread fast through the aquarium. Staff paused in hallways, shaken. Kids whispered. Lily's counselor quietly packed up that afternoon's camp session early. At a small seaside cafe near Cannery Row, Ethan Blake's phone rang. He picked up, not expecting anything urgent. Marcus's voice came through tight with panic. "It's Naomi. There was an accident. The tank. She's unconscious. They've taken her to Chomp." Ethan stood so abruptly his coffee spilled across the table. Lily looked up from her coloring book, startled. He gripped the phone, tighter voice, low. "We're coming." The storm broke outside. Ethan pulled Lily's jacket tighter around her and held her hand as they rushed for the car. The thunder echoed above the coastline as headlights cut through mist and sea spray. Lily sat in the back seat, silent, her scallop shell clutched in her hands like a prayer. The storm breaks outside. Ethan gets a phone call. His hand trembles as he whispers, "We're coming." Between sleep and sea, a mermaid drifts, called not by sonar but by love. Sometimes the smallest voice becomes the strongest anchor. The ICU at the community hospital of the Monterey Peninsula was cold with antiseptic and stillness. Naomi Rivers lay unconscious, her deep brown skin pale against the white hospital linens. An oxygen mask pressed over her face. Her head, bandaged along the temple, showed faint bruising where coral and current had taken their toll. Monitors beeped softly beside her, each sound a stubborn reminder that life still pulsed, though barely. A saline drip shimmered in a quiet rhythm, and beside her hospital bed sat a child too young to understand coma, but not too young to feel its weight. Lily Blake hadn't spoken a word since arriving. Not even to her father, who stood by the window, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his sweater. Outside, the remnants of the storm lingered, casting raindrops down the glass like tears. The room smelled of sea salt and bleach. Flowers sent from aquarium staff, marine campers, and even parents of children Naomi had taught, lined the windowsill in soft pinks and corals. But the air remained heavy. Naomi had been unconscious for 3 days. Lily sat in a chair far too big for her frame legs curled beneath her, the pink scallop shell necklace resting in the curve of her palms. She hadn't cried. Instead, she rocked slightly, humming to herself, a tune so quiet it seemed not to come from her lips, but from the air around her. Ethan recognized it, the sailor's lullaby Naomi used to hum during camp. He didn't know where Lily had learned it, but here it was again, delicate and solemn, like a thread stitched between worlds. Inside her mind, Naomi floated. She wasn't in the hospital. She wasn't in pain. She was suspended in an ocean that glowed like dusk, a world not bound by time or breath. Strange fish flickered past in hues of gold and amethyst. The water was warm, and her mermaid tail shimmered once more in emerald arcs. In this dreamlike realm, Naomi moved effortlessly, but something pulled on her chest, not painfully, but with purpose. She swam toward a sound, not bubbles or waves, but a melody soft and fractured, like a half-remembered memory. It led her through coral labyrinths into deeper blues. The further she swam, the clearer it became, Lily's voice humming the lullaby. Then another voice, Ethan's, not as clear, but present. It was not language she followed, but love. The tether between them. A dolphin appeared, its eyes impossibly familiar. It nudged her forward gently. When she reached her hand toward it, the creature vanished, leaving in its place a glowing shell, heart-shaped, pulsing with warmth. Naomi hesitated. Then she whispered, "I choose you," and pressed her hand to it. In the room, Lily sat upright, watching Naomi's fingers, a twitch, barely noticeable. Then another slight movement along the hand. Lily gasped and stood, the shell clutched tightly in one fist. She took a cautious step forward. Ethan turned, noticed her posture, and rushed to Naomi's side. Her heart rate on the monitor had changed, barely but different. A nurse entered, wide-eyed, checking vitals. Then slowly Naomi's eyes fluttered. Not fully open, but flickering, clouded, disoriented, but alive. Lily leaned in closer. "You're back," she whispered, voice trembling. Then louder, "You're back." Ethan dropped to his knees beside the bed, his hand sliding into Naomi's. Her fingers curled faintly around his. "Naomi," he breathed, voice cracking. "We weren't ready to let you go." Naomi blinked slowly. Her eyes met theirs, full of exhaustion and haze, but beneath the surface, something deeper, a glimmer of recognition. A homecoming. The nurse moved quickly, calling for the physician on duty. But Ethan didn't hear her. All he saw was the scallop shell glowing faintly in the crook of Lily's hand, and Naomi's weak but undeniable grip around his fingers. Lily stood beside the bed, still humming. Her body stilled only when Naomi gave the faintest nod. It wasn't a word, but it was enough. Naomi's chest rose and fell steadily now. The machines clicked and beeped, no longer threatening, just present, supportive. Her lips parted barely. Lily leaned in close, not expecting sound. Instead, she offered one of her own. "Don't go," she said softly. And Naomi's head tilted just enough to let them know she had heard. Outside, the skies began to clear. Monterey's air tasted clean and hopeful again. Somewhere waves crashed against the rocks with the confidence of return. In the hospital room, Ethan sank into the chair beside Naomi's bed, his hand still wrapped around hers, his face buried in the edge of the blanket. The child who once refused to speak had become the one who called someone back from silence. Naomi opens her eyes, weak but alive. Lily throws her arms around her. "You're back." Spring returned to Monterey in the way it always did, quietly, gently, with fog that lifted a little earlier each day, and sunshine that lingered just a bit longer over the waves. 6 months had passed since the accident, since Naomi Rivers had nearly been taken by the sea she loved. But she had surfaced not just from water, but from silence carried upward by the softest voice and the smallest hands. Naomi stood now on Carmel Beach, barefoot in the sand, a knit shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and curls loosened from the braid she'd worn for months. The wind danced through her hair as she gazed out at the low tide, the sky painted in watercolors of peach and silver. Behind her, music played faintly from a battery-powered speaker. It was that sailor's lullaby, the one Lily had hummed beside her hospital bed, the one Naomi had followed back to the waking world. The girl in question, now 8, was crouched nearby building a sandcastle with surprising precision. Lily wore a soft blue dress and a serious expression, her blonde curls pinned back by a shell-shaped clip. She arranged scallop shells in a ring around the tower, just as Naomi had once shown her at camp. Beside her, Ethan Blake stood with his hands in his pockets, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His eyes never left Naomi. He had come undone that day in the ICU, and something in him had changed since. Not broken, but opened. Softer, quieter, more alive. Naomi turned from the ocean and joined them. "That's a royal fortress," she said, kneeling beside Lily and brushing sand from the little girl's fingers. Lily nodded solemnly. "For the Mermaid Queen." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "And who might that be?" Lily didn't answer. Instead, she took off her scallop shell necklace, the same one Naomi had given her nearly a year before, and gently placed it on the castle's tallest tower. Then, for the first time in days, she smiled. Naomi felt something rise in her chest that wasn't words, wasn't breath, just warmth, like the tide curling in to kiss the shore. Ethan cleared his throat gently and stepped forward. "Hey," he said, his voice steadier than it had any right to be. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Naomi blinked. "What are you doing?" "Trying not to mess this up," he said, almost laughing. Then he knelt, not in the sand, but beside it, careful not to disturb the castle. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a heart-shaped sapphire the color of deep sea framed in a swirl of diamonds. It caught the sunlight, scattering flecks of blue onto the sand like sea glass. Naomi's breath caught. "Ethan, it's not because of what you did for Lily," he said. "It's because of who you are. You didn't save her. You saw her. You didn't fix me. You stood with me. That's not charity or obligation. That's you." Lily stood up between them, tugged Naomi's sleeve and whispered, "Say yes." Naomi laughed, really laughed, and dropped to her knees, arms wrapping around Lily first, then Ethan. She didn't answer with words. She didn't have to. They stayed like that a while, 3 people knotted together by grief and growth and grace. The wind stirred Naomi's shawl, and the sandcastle gleamed with its tiny crown of shell and sapphire. Later, when the sun dipped lower, the 3 of them walked down the shore, bare feet pressing into wet sand. Lily skipped ahead, chasing waves, and Naomi leaned against Ethan's side. He slipped his hand into hers, and she didn't let go. Behind them, their footprints trailed side by side, 3 sets woven into a single path. Farther down the beach, Lily knelt to bury something small in the sand, a second scallop shell engraved now with a name Naomi. She covered it gently, then stood and whispered something to the ocean. Thank you. Because she remembered. Because she had been remembered. And because now she was never going back to silence alone. Naomi kissed Ethan's cheek, her eyes still on Lily dancing near the tide. I used to think I was lost, she said softly. Ethan replied, You weren't lost. You were just waiting to be found. On a quiet beach where footprints vanish with the tide, a little girl once silenced by grief laughed under a sky brushed with gold. Not long ago she could barely whisper, but now her voice danced with the waves hand in hand, with the woman once known only to her as a mermaid. And nearby stood a man who, through love and loss, had discovered that healing doesn't always wear the suit you expect or come from the world you know. There was no grand finale, no television crew or headlines. Just one scallop shell buried in the sand and another worn proudly around a child's neck. Tokens of a bond born not of obligation, but of recognition. Naomi, a black woman too often overlooked or boxed in by others' assumptions, had become the heart of someone's home, not because she set out to prove anything, but because she showed up again and again with empathy, talent, and courage. And in return, she received what many dream of, not applause, but connection. If this story teaches us anything, it's that we must look beyond the surface, beyond silence, beyond skin, beyond the roles we're told we're meant to play. Sometimes a child doesn't need a therapist, but a safe presence who believes in her. Sometimes what pulls us back from the edge isn't science or money, but a voice softly calling our name. In a world so quick to judge by appearances or pedigree, this story gently reminds us the deepest transformations often begin in the quietest corners. So tonight, as you listen to the hush of your own home, the hum of a heater, the faint clink of dishes in the sink, maybe the laughter of a grandchild down the hall, take a moment to reflect on the invisible lifelines we offer one another. A glance, a word, a choice to stay, when it would be easier to walk away. And if this story stirred something in you, let it ripple outward, not as a grand gesture, but as a quiet commitment to see people fully. After all, even a single scallop shell, when offered with love, can become the anchor that brings someone home.